I thought I had it all figured out. 7 years of marriage with Amanda, and we had built what I considered a perfect life. Then her parents, Frank and Diane, moved in after losing their jobs. That was when everything started to change. Amanda began coming home late. Her attitude shifted, and I noticed strange text messages on her phone. My gut told me something was wrong, but I never imagined how badly my world would shatter. Before I tell you how my life fell apart and how I rebuilt it stronger, drop a comment about when you knew a relationship was over. And if you want to see more stories of resilience, hit that like and subscribe button. Amanda and I met during our sophomore year of college. We were both studying in the library when I accidentally knocked her books off the table. That embarrassing moment turned into coffee, which led to dinner, and soon we were inseparable. We dated for 2 years before I proposed on a hiking trip to her favorite mountain lookout. She cried when she said yes, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive. After graduation, I landed a position at a marketing firm, while Amanda pursued her dream of becoming a high school English teacher. We rented a small apartment and saved every penny we could. I worked overtime and took on freelance projects to build our future. Amanda spent evenings grading papers and creating lesson plans. We were young, ambitious, and deeply in love. 5 years into our marriage, we finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. It had a small backyard where I imagined our future children playing. The master bedroom had large windows that let in beautiful morning light that Amanda loved. We painted every room ourselves, laughing as we accidentally got more paint on each other than the walls. Those first years in our home were everything I had dreamed about. Amanda would cook dinner while I set the table. Weekends were spent on home improvement projects or exploring hiking trails. Holidays were split between our families, and both sets of parents seemed to get along well enough. Amanda was particularly close with her parents, calling them several times a week. Frank and Diane initially treated me like a son. Frank would invite me to watch football games, and Diane always sent us home with leftovers after family dinners. I noticed slight tensions with them occasionally. Frank sometimes made comments about how I should be making more money at my age. Diane would subtly suggest that Amanda was doing too much housework. I brushed these moments off, wanting to maintain family harmony for Amanda. I believed that respecting her parents was part of loving her. Everything changed when Frank lost his job at the manufacturing plant where he had worked for 20 years. Within 2 months, they could no longer afford their mortgage payments. During Sunday dinner at their house, they explained their situation. I could see the worry in their eyes. Amanda immediately offered our spare bedroom without consulting me. I was surprised but nodded in agreement. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. 3 months maximum, we all agreed. They moved in the following weekend, with more belongings than our spare bedroom could hold. Boxes filled our garage and their furniture replaced some of our own. I told myself it was fine. Family helps family during tough times. I wanted to be the bigger person, the supportive husband. The first few weeks were awkward, but manageable. We established a grocery payment system and divided household chores. I worked late most evenings to give them space and avoid the uncomfortable feeling of having my private home suddenly filled with extended family. Amanda spent more time in the living room with her parents, watching their favorite shows and reminiscing about her childhood. Our evening walks and intimate conversations became less frequent. I started noticing changes in our routine. Date nights were postponed because Diane had prepared dinner for everyone. Weekend trips were canceled because Frank and Diane might feel abandoned. My office became my refuge, the one place that still felt like mine. Still, I remained optimistic that things would return to normal once they found jobs and moved out. I held on to the hope that our marriage was strong enough to weather this temporary disruption. I was wrong. 6 months after her parents moved in, Amanda started staying out later than usual. At first, she explained it was staff meetings or papers that needed grading. I believed her because I had no reason not to. But then I noticed she was putting more effort into her appearance before work. New outfits, makeup, and a different hairstyle that she claimed was just to feel more professional. One evening, I came home early with flowers, hoping to surprise her with a spontaneous date night. Frank and Diane were watching television in our living room. They told me Amanda had texted that she would be late due to a department meeting. I put the flowers in water and waited. When she finally arrived at 9:30, her cheeks were flushed, and she seemed startled to see me waiting up. When I mentioned the flowers and my date night idea, she seemed distracted. She thanked me quickly, but said she was exhausted and needed a shower. When she left her phone on the counter, I noticed it was on silent mode. A text notification appeared from someone named Jackson, with a heart emoji next to it. My stomach dropped, but I convinced myself it could be innocent. A colleague, perhaps a female friend I had not met. Diane noticed my expression and quickly changed the subject, asking what I was planning to cook that weekend. Frank launched into a lecture about how my lawn care techniques were inadequate. I nodded absently, my mind replaying Amanda's recent behavior changes. The late nights, the new clothes, the silent phone. The next morning I casually asked about Jackson. Amanda tensed momentarily before explaining he was a new English teacher she was mentoring. The conversation ended there, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more changes. Amanda started going to the gym 3 evenings a week, something she had never shown interest in before. When she returned, she would shower immediately. Meanwhile, living with Frank and Diane became increasingly difficult. Frank criticized everything from my career choices to how I loaded the dishwasher. When I asked about their job search progress, they became defensive. Diane would say things like, "You cannot rush finding the right opportunity at our age." What had been presented as a temporary arrangement showed no signs of ending. One Saturday morning, I suggested we discuss a timeline for when they might find their own place. Amanda immediately became upset, accusing me of being selfish and unsupportive of her family. Frank crossed his arms and reminded me that family sticks together during hard times. Diane cried, wondering aloud what she had done to make me dislike them so much. I backpedaled, apologizing and assuring them I was just concerned about their comfort in our small home. That night, Amanda slept on the edge of the bed as far from me as possible. I lay awake wondering how I had become the villain in my own home. The next week I tried to reconnect with Amanda by planning a special dinner at her favorite restaurant for our anniversary. I made reservations and arranged for her parents to have dinner elsewhere. When I told Amanda about my plans, she seemed uncomfortable. "I love that restaurant, but do Mom and Dad know about this?" she asked. When I explained I had intentionally planned an evening for just the two of us, she frowned. "They will feel left out, Marcus. This is their home too now." Those words hit me hard. This was our home, the one we had saved for years to buy. Yet somehow I had lost my say in who lived there and how we spent our time. Nevertheless, I compromised. We all went to the restaurant together. Frank complained about the prices, and Diane questioned the waiter extensively about every ingredient. Amanda seemed relieved that her parents were included, while I felt increasingly invisible. The more I tried to save our relationship, the more Amanda pulled away. She changed her phone password. She took calls in the bathroom with the water running. She found reasons not to be alone with me. Meanwhile, Frank and Diane became more entrenched in our home, rearranging furniture and inviting their friends over without asking. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find Amanda not in bed. I found her in the kitchen, texting intensely with a smile I had not seen in months. When she noticed me, she quickly put the phone down. "Just checking in with a student's parent about a grade concern," she explained. At 2 in the morning, I asked. She claimed the parent worked night shifts. I pretended to believe her, but inside something broke. The next day, I checked our cell phone records. Multiple calls and texts to the same number, often late at night or during her supposed gym sessions. I wrote down the number, contemplating my next move. That evening, I detected an unfamiliar cologne scent on her jacket. When I hugged her, she stiffened and quickly moved away, claiming she needed to help her mother with dinner. I decided to confront her directly. I asked her if there was someone else. Her denial was immediate and vehement. She accused me of being paranoid and controlling. Frank overheard and intervened, telling me I should trust my wife implicitly. Diane suggested I was working too hard and imagining problems. 3 against 1. I retreated, doubting my own instincts, but the evidence kept mounting. Receipts from restaurants I had never been to with her. Weekend workshops that could not be verified. The growing emotional distance between us that no amount of effort on my part seemed to bridge. The marriage I had cherished was slipping through my fingers, and her parents were there witnessing its dissolution while telling me nothing was wrong. After weeks of mounting suspicion, I decided I needed to know the truth. On a Tuesday, when Amanda said she had a late department meeting, I left work early and parked across from the school. At 5:15, I watched her exit the building with a tall, dark-haired man. They walked closely, their shoulders touching. They got into his car and drove away. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. They drove to a restaurant in a neighboring town. Through the window, I could see them laughing, his hand occasionally touching hers across the table. They shared dessert from the same plate. This was not a professional meeting. After dinner, they drove to a hotel just off the highway. I sat in my car, numb with shock, as they walked into the lobby together. He had his arm around her waist. I took photos with my phone, each click feeling like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I waited for 2 hours, forcing myself to stay, until I saw them leave. Amanda kissed him in the parking lot, a long, passionate kiss that confirmed everything. I drove home in a daze, barely remembering the journey. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, something raw and bleeding inside me. When I got home, Frank and Diane were watching a movie in our living room. They asked where I had been. I mumbled something about working late and went straight to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through the photos I had taken, torturing myself with the evidence. Around 11, Amanda came home. She called out cheerfully that the meeting had run long and she had grabbed dinner with colleagues. I waited until she came to the bedroom. I did not yell or scream. With shaking hands, I simply showed her the first photo on my phone. Her face drained of color. She tried to grab the phone, but I pulled it away. "Who is he, Amanda?" I asked quietly. At first, she tried to deny it. He was just a friend, a colleague. We were discussing curriculum. But as I swiped to the next photo and the next, her lies crumbled. Finally, she sat down heavily on the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Jackson Thompson," she whispered. "He teaches world history. We have been seeing each other for 3 months." The calm I had maintained shattered. 3 months of lies. 3 months of coming home to me and her parents after being with him. 3 months of making me doubt my own sanity when I questioned her behavior. I asked her why. She said I had changed. I was always working, always tired. When her parents moved in, I had become distant. Jackson made her feel wanted, appreciated, alive. I reminded her that I had been working extra hours to support her parents, that I had given up my privacy and comfort to help her family, that every attempt I made to connect with her was thwarted by her parents' presence or her growing indifference. She accused me of using her parents as an excuse, claiming our problems started long before they moved in. It was a rewriting of history that stunned me. Our argument grew louder. Frank and Diane burst into the room, demanding to know what was happening. Amanda, sobbing, told them I was accusing her of cheating. Before I could speak, Frank pointed his finger in my face. "You never deserved her," he spat. "You have been looking for an excuse to hurt her." I showed them the photos. Diane gasped, but Frank barely glanced at them. "So she made a mistake," he said dismissively. "Marriages survive these things if there is enough commitment." His implication was clear. This was my fault for not being understanding enough. Diane put her arm around Amanda. "People make mistakes, Marcus," she said softly. "If you truly love her, you will work through this." I looked at the three of them, suddenly understanding. They were a unit. They always had been. I was the outsider who had temporarily been allowed into their circle. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my keys. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying every moment of our marriage, wondering where it had all gone wrong. By morning, I had clarity. I could not continue in a marriage without trust. I could not live with people who disrespected me in my own home. Something had to change. When I returned, Amanda was in the kitchen with her mother. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Have you calmed down?" she asked tentatively. I told her I had made a decision. I wanted a divorce. She began to cry again, saying she would end things with Jackson, that we could go to counseling. But her words felt hollow, too little too late. Frank stormed in, having overheard. "You cannot throw away 7 years over one indiscretion," he shouted. Diane added that every marriage faced challenges, that walking away was the coward's choice. Amanda begged me to reconsider, promising things would be different. But I had reached my breaking point. The trust was irreparably broken, not just by her affair, but by months of deception and gaslighting. "I am done," I said simply. "I want you all to move out." This set off another round of outrage. Frank reminded me that they had nowhere to go. No jobs, no savings. Amanda said I was being cruel and vindictive. Diane suggested I was the one who should leave if I was so unhappy. When I stood my ground, Frank made a threat that chilled me. "This house is as much Amanda's as it is yours," he said. "We are not going anywhere. If you want a divorce, you will be the one who leaves with nothing." I walked away from the conversation, locked myself in my home office, and made a phone call that would change everything. The next day I met with a lawyer who specialized in divorce cases. I brought copies of our financial records, the deed to our house, and the evidence of Amanda's affair. After reviewing everything, my lawyer gave me news that would turn the tide in my favor. Amanda had been in graduate school when we purchased it, and her credit score had been too low to be included on the mortgage. We had always intended to add her name later, but never got around to it. Furthermore, I had made the down payment using an inheritance from my grandfather. I had documented this with a gift letter, making it separate property rather than marital property in our state. These two facts gave me significant leverage. My lawyer advised me to act quickly before Amanda could file any claims. Armed with this knowledge, I returned home with a new confidence. I found Frank, Diane, and Amanda in the living room, apparently discussing their strategy. I placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside was a notice to vacate the premises within 30 days, prepared by my lawyer. Legal language made it clear that they were not tenants with rights, but guests who had overstayed their welcome. Frank laughed when he read it. "You cannot evict your own wife," he scoffed. I showed him the property deed, with only my name on it. His face reddened as he realized the implications. Amanda looked stunned. She had apparently forgotten or never realized this detail about our home purchase. "I have filed for divorce on grounds of adultery," I informed them calmly. "The evidence is substantial. You have 30 days to find alternative accommodation. If you are not gone by, then I will pursue formal eviction proceedings." I advised Amanda to get her own lawyer immediately. Frank erupted in anger, threatening lawsuits and retribution. Diane began crying dramatically about being put out on the street. Amanda vacillated between begging for another chance and accusing me of planning this all along. I remained unmoved. The manipulation tactics that had worked for months now bounced off my new emotional armor. That evening, I contacted Amanda's school principal. I did not mention the affair directly, but expressed concern about unprofessional relationships between staff members. It was enough to trigger an investigation. Within a week, both Amanda and Jackson were called in for separate meetings with administration. Meanwhile, Frank and Diane scrambled to find housing. Their poor credit and lack of income made it difficult. Amanda began packing her things, alternating between tears and cold silence. I stayed out of their way, sleeping in my office and eating meals outside the home. I changed the Wi-Fi password and canceled the streaming services they used, small acts of reclaiming what was mine. 3 weeks after my ultimatum, they moved out. Frank had found a distant cousin willing to rent them a small 2-bedroom apartment. Amanda went with them, having no better options. The school investigation resulted in Jackson being reassigned to another district school, while Amanda received a formal reprimand and was placed on probation. Their relationship, exposed to professional scrutiny, quickly crumbled under the pressure. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. With the evidence of infidelity and the house clearly in my name, Amanda had little ground to stand on. She attempted to claim half of our savings, but my lawyer countered by itemizing the additional expenses incurred by housing her parents for nearly a year without contribution. In the end, she received only her personal belongings and her own retirement account. I later heard through mutual friends that Amanda was struggling financially. The apartment was cramped, and tensions with her parents had escalated now that they were all under stress. Jackson had broken things off, unwilling to deal with the professional consequences and family drama. Her parents, who had been so quick to justify her behavior, now criticized her poor judgment that had cost them all their comfortable living arrangement. As for me, I kept the house, but initially found it too empty, too full of memories. Each room held echoes of what I had thought was happiness. The first few weeks alone were the hardest. I would come home from work to silence cook meals for one and try to fill the evenings with projects and distractions. Sleep was elusive, and when it came, it was filled with dreams of betrayal. The healing did not happen overnight. For the first month after they left, I barely functioned. I went to work, came home, and stared at walls. Friends called, but I rarely answered. Family offered support, but I was not ready to talk about what had happened. The shame of being cheated on, of having missed the signs, felt overwhelming. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. I started with small steps. I rearranged the furniture, painted the walls new colors. I converted the spare bedroom into a home gym. Physical exertion became my therapy, a way to exhaust my body enough that my mind could rest. I joined a hiking group that met on weekends, forcing myself into social situations, even when all I wanted was solitude. At work, I channeled my energy into new projects. My boss noticed the change, the increased focus and determination. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a promotion. The additional income allowed me to renovate the kitchen, removing another space that held too many memories of family dinners with people who had betrayed me. A colleague suggested I join a support group for divorced men. Initially, I resisted, uncomfortable with the idea of sharing my pain with strangers. But eventually, I attended a meeting. Listening to others tell stories similar to mine made me feel less alone. There was no magic solution offered, no quick fix for heartbreak, but there was understanding. I kept going back. Through the group, I met people who had not only survived divorce but thrived afterward. They had rebuilt their lives, found new relationships, discovered parts of themselves that had been suppressed in unhappy marriages. Their experiences gave me hope that my story would not end with betrayal. 1 year after Amanda and her parents left, I hosted a dinner party for my new friends. As I looked around the table at the laughter and conversation, I realized something important. I had created a new kind of family, one based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation. These people chose to be in my life, and I chose them. Dating again was a slower process. Trust did not come easily after what I had experienced. I had a few false starts, brief relationships that fizzled when my walls came up, but eventually I met someone who understood my hesitation, who gave me space to heal, while remaining steadfast in her interest. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and clear boundaries. What surprised me most about the healing process was how I came to view Amanda and her parents. The burning anger faded over time, replaced by something closer to pity. They were still stuck in their dysfunctional patterns, still making the same mistakes. I had escaped not just a failing marriage, but a toxic family system. I learned valuable lessons from the experience. I learned about setting boundaries and recognizing red flags. I learned that sometimes love is not enough if respect and honesty are absent. Most importantly, I learned that I was stronger than I had ever realized. The man who had been afraid to ask his in-laws when they planned to move out was gone, replaced by someone who knew his worth and stood up for himself. Today, my life bears little resemblance to what it was 2 years ago. The house is fully mine now in every sense. I have found happiness I did not think possible during those dark days. And while I would never wish such betrayal on anyone, I recognize that sometimes we need to lose what we thought we wanted to find what we truly need. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that ultimately led to a better life? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming adversity. And if you know someone who might benefit from this message of resilience, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is exactly what you need to begin writing a better one.